You see, when you analyze the life and times of somebody like Ronnie Pereira, there's no way in which you can look at it in isolation. He was a product of the times that obtained then. As a result, he developed a value system which mattered then. Now, if you'd like to sort of just think of your career and the fact that you want to be a success and you want people to sort of praise you, is one dimension. But the thing that stood out about Ronnie Pereira in all our interactions was the fact that he would never compromise on what he essentially believed was right or correct. Now, I'm not for a moment suggesting that he was always right. Like all of us,
Yes.
to err is human, to forgive divine.
Divine.
But the point was, in my whole, in all my association with him, I never got the impression that he was doing anything for effect, but rather because he genuinely believed that what he was doing was the right thing to do. Now, this again, if you look back, it has to be viewed in the correct perspective. That when we got our independence, you had Navy, Army, Air Force modeled completely on the British model. Now, there again, the Navy, the Royal Navy was the prime service because England is an island.
So,
So here there were these people who really didn't think things through, who just aped all these traditions and culture and whatnot without realizing that this had to be earned over a period of time, either by commitment or dedication or even an acceptance of your value in
so,
the system that obtained in our time.
so,
So there was always this dichotomy of different people trying to get publicity and this and that, taking credit where it wasn't warranted. And I cannot remember Admiral Ronnie Pereira ever stooping to that level. Whatever he did, whatever he said, whatever interaction he did, was as a result of his conviction that it was something that needed to be done, something that was done wrong, or that something that needed correction. Now, here we come across a very major dichotomy. When you are dealing in the sort of environment that obtains in our country today, where theoretically it's civil rule, practically it's ruled by the bureaucracy.
so,
This is something that you can encounter on a daily basis. And whether you like it or not, over a period of time, depending on your approach, attitude, the decisions you've taken, and even the way you've been reported.
so,
Because you're not allowed to go and say anything that you feel.
so,
It's always depending on somebody else's whims and fancies or whatever motivation they've got. And once again, in the case of Ronnie Pereira, I don't believe this ever crossed his mind at all. That if I do this, this will happen. If I do that, that will happen. I remember the other day somebody telling me that, sir, he came to talk to us. We were doing the course at the NDC. And somebody at the end of his talk said, what do you expect to be earmarked for, sidestepped into? And he said, nothing. He says, because I don't believe I am very popular. Because he says, I've always called a spade or a shovel if it was necessary.
so,
And he says, I can't imagine anyone offering me anything else after that. Needless to say, he wasn't offered anything.
so,
But the point very simply is that no matter how you look at the environment around you and the way values have shifted and standards have
drop.
diminished
So,
and norms have become non-existent,
so,
I think his whole life and his career was a shining example
yes, indeed.
of that old what shall I say, that old adage, you can't keep a good man down. Because it wasn't on one occasion, it was a series of occasions when he just said something that he felt needed to be said. Sometimes possibly people felt they were talking out of turn. But then by his standards, he wasn't. He could have been because of the lack of standards and people listening to him,
Sir.
or people who then had to sit in judgment on his achievements. I think you want to understand one very basic fact, and that is the services is not a job, it's not a career, it's a vocation. Because there are times when any sensible fellow would balk at doing something, and yet that's the time when they say fools rush in where Indians fear to tread. And I said the thing that keeps us going is the fact that there are enough people who think that way. Because if you look at the current state of our country, you ask yourself, what is it that you want to preserve? What is it that you subscribe to? And I was asked this question years ago in '89 by the then ambassador to Russia, who was the ex-cabinet secretary, a gentleman called Kohl. I was in Moscow with the vice chief, as the vice chief, and with the defense minister. And I was set up for an interview, and I was asked, what do you see as the role of the army in the days to come? Because all around us there were coups, there was unrest, there was unsettlement and everything. And I said, to hold things together till you put your act together. And the ambassador said, I'm sorry, I didn't get that. So I repeated it. And he says, oh, beautiful general, I couldn't have put it better myself. So I said, nobody would have asked you this question, ambassador. You see, the point that I'm trying to make
Sir.
is that most times when you stood for what was right,
Sir.
you were in effect bucking the system.
Sir.
Now, if you look at it from the point of view of somebody who's obsessed with the need to advance, there was something terribly wrong with you. But if you look at it from the point of view of somebody who looked on this as his contribution to nation building, it was eminently right. And this is basically what Ronnie Pereira's greatest strength was. I don't believe he ever compromised on what he felt was in the national interest.
Anything else you would like to add, sir, about either Admiral Pereira or his
Yes,
wife?
that he played a very important role in the evolution of the ethos of the Navy. And the point is that all our institutions need role models. And it is very much more relevant when the institution is small and focused. And that is why he was able to make such a lasting, positive impact. I wish we had more people like him.